My name is Kyle Roberts, and I'm the Associate Director of Library and Museum Programming at the American Philosophical Society. Welcome to today's Friends of the American Philosophical Society event with Sabrina Bocanegra, talking about Revolutionary City, a portal to the nation's founding. I'm glad that so many of you have joined us today. The Friends of the APS provide critical, unrestricted support that allows the Society to allocate the funds where they are needed most. Last year, generous gifts from the Friends allowed us to convert all of our programs to a virtual platform, to support scholars and researchers working remotely, and to install new air filtration systems in all of our buildings, ensuring our continued safety when we once again gather in person. Our sincere thanks for your support. The American Philosophical Society resides in Lenapehoking, the homeland of the Lenape people, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. The APS acknowledges with respect their continued presence and perseverance, expresses sincere thanks for the past and ongoing generosity of numerous Indigenous communities and individuals who've offered their guidance, their expertise, and opportunities for collaboration. In the summer of 2020, the APS was very pleased to learn it had been successful in its application for a highly competitive Institute for Museum and Research and Library Services, IMLS, National Leadership Grants for Libraries Planning Grant to create Revolutionary City, a portal to the nation's founding. As you'll learn today, this 12-month grant enabled us to hire a full-time project data manager to work with APS library and museum professionals to design a shared digital repository. Scholars, teachers, students, and the interested public will be able to visit the Revolutionary City portal when it's done to learn diverse stories of the American Revolution. Stories that are currently separated, obscured, and inaccessible in the archives from the perspective of the residents of America's Revolutionary City, Philadelphia. The project aims to digitize all of the surviving manuscript material created or received in Philadelphia during the period of the American Revolution, beginning with the collections of the American Philosophical Society, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, and the Library Company of Philadelphia. As you can imagine, this is no small task, and what we believe will be a major contribution to the nation's celebration of its 250th anniversary of independence in 2026. Now, before I turn the Zoom microphone over to my colleague Sabrina, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are using Zoom webinar today, so not to worry, you've all been muted. If you have a question at any time, please use the Q&A button at the bottom center of your navigation bar. You might want to just locate it now, it's right down there. You can type your question in there at any point when it pops to mind. There will be time at the end of the panel for questions with our speaker. We're also excited to offer closed captioning for today's virtual discussion. If you'd like to use it during the panel, please click on the CC box on the bottom navigation bar of Zoom. It should be right to the right of the Q&A button. And with that, let me bring up my colleague Sabrina. Sabrina Bocanegra is the IMLS grant-funded project data manager for the Revolutionary City project, and she will be talking to you about the project today. Do you want me to bring the slides up right away, or do you want to wait a bit? Okay, I'll bring them up.
Great. Thank you, Kyle, and hello, everyone. I'm Sabrina. I am a trained archivist, and you wouldn't mind hitting the next slide, Kyle. So a little background about me. I received my bachelor's degree in anthropology from Temple University and my Master of Science in Library and Information Science from Drexel University. Before and after grad school, I volunteered, interned, and worked professionally at many different special collection libraries and archives in the Philadelphia area, such as Historical Society of Pennsylvania, Drexel University's College of Medicine Legacy Center, the College of Physicians of Philadelphia Historical Medical Library, and the Drexel University Archives. In this lovely photo I dug up, I'm showcasing some of Drexel's College of Medicine's rich history of diversity. Next slide. Between 2018 and 2020, I managed the Legacy Center's component of two collaborative digital projects in her own right, which highlights women's struggle to assert their rights throughout the 100 years prior to the 19th Amendment, and For the Health of the Nation, showcasing the rich medical heritage of Philadelphia, particularly related to medical education. In both projects, we looked for the hidden or unheard voices of women, so women physicians, women deans, women medical students, and the diverse student body asserting their rights in the 18th and 19th centuries. And of course, not just the women, the voices of the male medical students and physicians who were attending or lecturing at medical school with origins in non-traditional medicine. So these projects brought collections together from a number of different institutions and repositories throughout the Philadelphia area. And it was really exciting to see how collections that have been physically siloed could be viewed and analyzed in one digital space. And also how these materials often showed relations not usually seen in the physical archive. So you can actually see how women and men across different professions and races were talking to each other during this time. And specifically for the Legacy Center, how physicians and medical students at these schools engaged with other Philadelphia medical schools and organizations. Since Philadelphia was and still is a tight-knit community, somehow everyone knows everyone. While at Drexel, I worked with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office a lot and contributed to outreach efforts there. And they really opened my eyes to the broad definition of diversity, as in not only thinking about diversity groups in terms of ethnicity, but also age, generational, refugees, those in the military, mothers, new parents, and handicapped persons. There's a number of ways of thinking about diversity. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. As I started to work on Revolutionary City here at the American Philosophical Society, and here's a glimpse of our beta portal right now, I was thrilled to be a part of another project that would do the important work of bringing collections together from different institutions with the primary goal of uncovering those hidden voices along the way. Which brings me to why you're all here today. Next slide. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'll talk about the work that me and the project's co-managers, Kyle Roberts and Byron Miller, have been doing over the past 8 months under an Institute for Museums and Libraries Services National Leadership Grant to create the Revolutionary City, a portal to the nation's founding. The project will design a public shared digital repository where scholars, students, teachers, and the general public can learn about the diverse stories of the American Revolution from the perspective of residents of America's revolutionary city, Philadelphia. The project aims to digitize all of the surviving manuscript material created or received in Philadelphia during the period of the Revolution. So our scope right now is between May 1774 and September 1783. And we are beginning with the collections of the American Philosophical Society, Historical Society of Pennsylvania, and Library Company in Philadelphia. So today I will get into the genesis of the project, the possibilities of enhanced metadata, and the opportunities and challenges of designing an accessible portal. And later, like Kyle said, we'll have some questions or time for questions that I'll try my best to answer. Next slide. The project is really driven by 3 primary objectives or goals as seen here: to engage a stakeholder committee to identify those missing narratives of the revolution, which I will get into a little later on, to review existing metadata and propose metadata standards designed to make an accessible those broader range of voices. And third, to design a digital portal which will serve as a platform for discovery, contextualization, and education about the American Revolution. So basically our challenge in this project is to break down the institutional barriers that impede access to material that many people find inaccessible and hard to use, while also recovering those underrepresented voices of the revolution. Next slide. So as the United States approaches its semi-quincentennial or 250th anniversary in 2026, Americans will be looking for materials to help them understand the nation's founding principles, history, and the democratic processes. They'll want to find their own diverse backgrounds and experiences reflected in these sources. And no doubt, they'll want to see themselves in the shared story of the women and men who, declared independence, founded a new nation, and united as a citizenry to create democracy. I guess where they're going to want to find all of this information online. Next slide. So our initial challenge to recovering underrepresented voices of the revolution is the organization of the physical archive. So the great age of institutions like LCP, founded in 1731, APS, founded in 1743, and in 1824, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, has ensured that they have become the repositories of numerous manuscript, family, and institutional records from across the Philadelphia region. Their longstanding presence has ensured survival of materials that might not have otherwise survived. The close connections between these institutions has meant that many of the same families participated over time, so as shareholders, borrowers, and supporters. And when it came down to depositing family papers, it was not uncommon for the papers of a single family to be spread across multiple institutions. The varying cataloging resources, digitization, and access policies of each institution has meant that these archives often remain dispersed and difficult to be reconstituted in their whole. This is where digitally breaking down those institutional barriers comes into play. Next slide. These next couple slides are just showcasing some of the various types of materials we'll be working with in this pilot phase. So I mentioned the first challenge of uncovering those, or the physical archive. So second challenge is the voices of the non-elite are often obscured within these collections due to how they've traditionally been cataloged. So for this period, archival collections tend to be arranged around elite white men connected with these papers, often subordinating the voices of women, African Americans, loyalists, and Native Americans connected within or contained within. Next slide. Collections of Philadelphia's best known revolutionaries such as Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Paine have traditionally received more attention than the vast array of smaller, often overlooked collections of less compelling figures. The stories of the latter exist throughout the record, but accessing them can be difficult for those without the resources or training to know how to find them. This is especially true in collections that are minimally processed or processed with an eye towards centering the elite white male figure. Next slide. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that accessibility must be a guiding principle in the work that archives do today. The opening hours and requirements for admission to any reading room significantly limits who can or does feel comfortable using these materials, especially if you're having to visit multiple institutions because of the scattered nature of materials. And while there are a few freely accessible digital sites and others behind paywalls where you can access some of this material, there's yet to be a project to undertake how best to digitize and make available a key selection of these important collections. Next slide. Luckily, our team is well versed in digital projects that bring together a number of institutions and repositories. And like I mentioned in the beginning, we've seen firsthand how exciting it is when collections that have been physically siloed are digitally united in one single place. There are, of course, many cities for which a project like this could be fruitfully done, but our focus is on Philadelphia at the moment. Philadelphia is an iconic symbol of the American Revolution, home to the Continental Congress, Independence Hall. But while these historic sites can be visited, the personal diaries, correspondence, and broadsides that you just saw in those last few slides that document the diverse perspectives of the Revolution cannot easily be found online. So by focusing on a wide range of materials, we hope to provide a more complete picture of the revolution in Philadelphia than other online databases have done thus far. And now you can see here a fuller screenshot of our beta homepage that I showed earlier. I think it's coming together rather nicely, but let me briefly walk you through how we got to this point of being able to show you a product. So I mentioned some of the problems with archives and its dispersed nature of materials and its role in obscuring the voices of lesser well-known individuals in Philadelphia during the revolutionary period. So throughout the project, our leading question has been, how do we go about recovering those voices and stories using this portal? Next slide. So our approach was simple in theory, enhance the metadata of each item and add an overarching theme or some sort of local subject that has the ability to further categorize materials. In this first phase, my job was really just to transform the existing metadata from each institution and enhance it before it could be uploaded into our portal so that we could do some testing with it. However, there was some work to be done before this happened. At its heart, this pilot phase was really centered around planning for scalability and application beyond this project. I noted earlier that Philadelphia is our focus now, but the longer term goal is to develop an expanded national online portal on the revolution. Next slide. With that in mind, it was crucial to first look at descriptive metadata practices of all three of our institutions and really emphasize the creation of a simple, interoperable metadata model or schema that other institutions or future partners with fewer resources could manage and see themselves doing. Focusing on these standards and guidelines was the first step in this process of really building that confidence for future partners. Also, complementing and examining the model of collaborative work deployed by the Digital Public Library of America and the Philadelphia Area Consortium of Special Collections Libraries, and seeking out projects similar to Revolutionary City, where individual institutions are kind enough to openly share their documentation, and we were able to determine what works for us and what we think will work for others. A silver lining really in this pandemic year has been the amount of time it has given us to really establish our project workflows. Of course, this is an iterative process, but without those detailed workflows at the start, to follow these workflows, it's easy to get in the weeds, once we start with the digitization and uploading and that whole process. Next slide. Another guiding principles for us has been, do not reinvent the wheel. That being said, we built our portal using the open source digital asset manager, Islandora. And there were really three main factors in our decision to use Islandora. The first was knowledge. So the project team is very well versed in this platform. The second was support. Islandora is one of the most collaborative and supportive open source communities out there, with repositories built on Islandora all around the world. There is ample opportunity to reach out and ask for any help or feedback and get an answer almost immediately. And then there's the technological infrastructure. So if you weren't aware, the APS Digital Library is built with Islandora. So we already have a built-in repository to store all of the digitized material. So for the project, we are using the same back-end repository of the APS Digital Library to store all of the project materials. So right now, everything from LCP and HSP. This way, we don't have to create a separate repository for the project. And then to the end user, the Revolutionary City portal will be a freestanding project and not look like it has any connection to the APS Digital Library. As you can see here, in our hamburger, this is how the APS Digital Library and the Revolutionary City portal is built. So Fedora, the bottom bun, is a digital asset management architecture. So it functions as the preservation layer, and this is where all of the digital assets will live. So this is actually a shared bottom bun in our case, where all assets from the APS Digital Library and the project live together. Drupal, the top bun here, is the open source content management system that functions as the front end of Islandora. So this is the presentation layer, what the user sees basically. So this top bun is not shared, and this is where the APS Digital Library and the project will have separate websites. And then Solar, the cheese, is an open source enterprise search platform that serves as our search layer and allows us to speak, or us and the user, to speak to the material that is held in Fedora. And of course, Islandora is the glue, or the patty here that holds it all together. And there are a couple other layers in there, but these are basically the main parts of what make up the portal. Next slide. Again, always in the back of my mind is, Sabrina, do not reinvent the wheel here. So back at the end of 2020 and into January, I spent a lot of time exploring the design and functionality of other digital repositories built on Islandora and created an exhaustive wish list for the portal. We sought out guidance and feedback from internal and external stakeholders who helped us really narrow down our list to prioritize essential function and design elements. And that's what you see here. And you're not seeing my 8-page list of hopes and dreams for the portal, unfortunately. So the goal has always been to use existing guidelines and technologies to incorporate our diverse audiences from the very beginning of the project. Engaging our diverse team of stakeholders and incorporating their feedback at every step has been so essential throughout this whole project, especially in the work of recovering hidden voices, which I'll get into a little bit now. Next slide. So right from the start, we engaged a team of 16 educators, public history professionals, scholars, and digital humanists in a bi-monthly discussions about the needs and opportunities involved in making historic materials not only available, but also usable to the broader public. In our first meeting with them back in November, we asked the question, what are some of the narratives about Philadelphia during the American Revolution that you would like to teach, interpret, or research? The discussions that followed served as the groundwork for what our possible overarching themes could be. The stakeholders identified many narratives, as you can see from this slide, that are still being overlooked today, such as everyday citizens, Philadelphia's blended population, indigenous peoples, African American and Black communities, women and youth, gender questioning individuals, and then there's loyalists, exiles, and those individuals that stayed neutral during this tumultuous time. And while this was a great list to start with, the narratives presented here were just ultimately too narrow for them to be meaningful to users as larger themes when you consider the thousands upon thousands of items that would live on the site. So where this list did prove useful was during the metadata enhancement that I did. So next slide. Collections we've chosen for the pilot came with existing metadata that needed to be reformatted and enhanced based on our project standards that I was talking about earlier. So it was clear that the main enhancements that had to be made were in fields like title, abstract, and subjects. Next slide. Adding controlled vocabularies or subjects that indicated if an item contained or highlighted an underrepresented voice or narrative was just as important as adding keywords and phrases and titles and abstracts to supplement those subjects and act as additional access points for those not familiar with controlled vocabularies and wanting to fill the search box with familiar terms. We were able to benefit from the stakeholder team's expertise and experience by asking them to actually create metadata for a couple of the primary sources included in our pilot. So during this exercise, stakeholders were able to engage with the sources in a different way than they normally do. They provided their own perspectives on the research value, access points, and themes, ultimately producing meaningful and useful metadata for the primary source's digital surrogate. Next slide. Here's an example of a primary source that had been previously uploaded into the digital library of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. So here we have some pretty standard metadata, though there are a lack of subjects in the digital library itself. So like I said, stakeholders came up with their own metadata, specifically focusing on subjects and themes and really enhancing the description. And this is what they came up with. Next slide. Lot going on here, but so what I did with this information from the stakeholders is really just pull out the appropriate keywords, phrases, and concepts and turn them into authoritative subjects that could be associated with this particular item and created a fuller description to be uploaded into the portal. Next slide. So here's a screenshot of that HSP primary source in our viewer in the portal, and next slide. And here is the object metadata that goes with it. So as you can see, there are a lot of useful terms in the abstract itself that are not found in the subjects. And this is what I was talking about earlier with having a lot of different access points into a document. It is a tricky balance of trying to figure out or imagine, what is useful information and what is just overwhelming and ultimately not helpful to the user. So those stakeholders really helped out with that, and talking with them was really helpful. And so this exercise really reaffirmed our belief that the stakeholders would be key to answering the question of how to recover these underrepresented voices and stories using the portal. I should point out, and perhaps many of you are unaware, that metadata creators like myself are not subject experts and usually do not have the time to enhance every primary source document that comes our way. When you think about the tens of thousands of pages that will eventually fill the portal, there's just not enough time and resources to give each item the enhanced metadata it deserves, which is why, creating a set of overarching themes is going to be so important moving forward with this project. Next slide. Again, we have that great list of overlooked narratives that was ultimately too narrow to be meaningful to users as larger overarching concepts, especially when we look at the American Revolution as a whole and the documents that cover these larger topics, such as economy, political philosophies, British resistance, the waging of the actual war, and of course the mobilized populace. So what we focus our efforts on with the narratives is using the subject headings and keywords to uncover those voices. And then in the larger scheme of the portal, these voices will appear under the larger themes and will be supplemented with contextual materials such as essays and lesson plans, so that they're easier for the users to navigate and understand how to find what they're looking for. So again, this is our beta site that you see here. This is a work in progress. Obviously, you can see that with all the Ipsum text here. But next slide. What we'd like to have in that last screenshot is a description or explanation, of what each theme covers and entails, followed by some examples and keywords that could serve as sub-themes when searching for the specific voices that you want to find. So for example, live experience is one of our 10 themes at the moment. And you can see the many narratives that stakeholders highlighted fall under this category. Next slide. So we really couldn't have gotten to these themes without the voice of our stakeholders. A large part of the project is to recover the voices of marginalized communities. This is what we knew. But as we started the process, we realized that we were also in the process of adding other voices that are usually spoken of, but rarely consulted. And that is that of the end user. We always develop projects with the user in mind, saying the user will want this, the community will want this. But, we rarely have reached out and engaged communities in a sustained dialogue about what they would actually want out of a digital project. This project afforded us the opportunity and time to actually assemble a diverse community of stakeholders who would actually be active members of the project team from the very beginning. This has been a really great learning experience. Trying to navigate feedback and incorporate it into the project has been a process. Ego needs to be completely checked, and you need to realize that no matter how clear you think something is, the end user may not always see what you do. You have to really meet them where they are technologically. So, and many of the names here, of our stakeholders, they're not digital humanists, or not all of them are archivists. And so the processes and concepts that are second nature to us had to be explained in a way that made sense to our group, and so that they could better contribute their subject expertise and their experience and help define the scope of our project. So again, this whole process has been very eye-opening for us, and I'm sure that the APS will use this model in the future for similar projects. I want to thank you all for joining me today and letting me talk about this project that I'm very excited about, and shout out to our project team and our partners, all of which I could not have done my job these past 8 months without.
Well, thank you so much, Sabrina. That was great. We've got questions coming in. And so as folks think about their questions, feel free, please use the Q&A button. We've got a good 30 minutes to really dig into this project. While those questions are coming in, I just wanted to kind of start with an overarching question. You work at a library, and libraries have evolved to have many different ways of sharing information. We could have done an exhibition about Revolutionary City. We could have done a printed volume where we did, transcribed all these documents and put them all together. Why do you think the digital approach is the right one to go with for this project?
Thank you, Kyle, for that great question. I think that, a digital approach, it's basically, I said this in the presentation, and I say it in my head all the time. All of these collections are, in all these different institutions, and, being able to digitize them and put them online into one shared space, so that you have them all in one place and you can see everything. You don't have to go, from here to there, is really important, I think, in a number of ways. I said, we can analyze and see, and see the relations between different documents and different people, and that's really exciting for me. I know I will give an example of the Legacy Center, the project for the Health of the New Nation. The Legacy Center has a couple different lecture notebooks, student notebooks, from one person. And Jefferson, who is part of the Jefferson Archives, is part of this project, and they had another notebook from this person that was missing at the Legacy Center. So it's kind of the thing where it's like, okay, now they've been completed in this one online space, and I'm not going to talk about why they were separated, but things like that, where like an exhibition, you can go in and look at this pretty stuff and have an explanation of what it is. But for a portal, you get to do the the researching yourself. I'm just here to let you know it's here, and what I'm trying to make it so it's discoverable. Really, that's basically my whole job, and I love it.
Wouldn't another part, right, just be the scope that we're talking about here? I think by the spreadsheet count that I've seen from you, 110,000 discrete objects, right, which could be multiple pages on top of that, right?
Yes, absolutely. In my brain, I was like, maybe I should show this spreadsheet, but I will refrain from doing that right now. But that's also true. The amount of pages and items that will be in one place, that's just something you can't do in a reading room, at least in a specific amount of time.
It would be a very big exhibition, and it would be a lot of volumes of work.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's very exciting about this project is your ambitions, right? So we start with the American Philosophical Society and the Historical Society and the Library Company's collections, but we've made a commitment to incorporating other collections as they go. So I don't, maybe Drexel has some materials, maybe you'll get to work with them again.
Of course, that would be a dream.
So I know that in general, you and Bayard Miller in the CDS tend to hold your projects a little close before you're ready to share them, but could we twist your arm to do a live demo of the site, or is that not possible?
No, that's very possible. Let me get situated here and figure out where this website is. Taking lots of screenshots and figuring that out. I will share my screen. Okay. Great. Can we all see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so here is the live, for us, live beta version of the portal. So 1 second, and I'll preface this, little walkthrough for you guys by saying this is a beta version and it's our latest version. It took a lot to get here and that we only have about 157 digital objects or actual documents in the portal right now. So here it is. So the simple search right here is, like I said, it's a simple search where I could search for anything here. But I'll just mention that below this, welcome to Revolutionary City, there will be a little paragraph or so, like introducing the project and, saying, why are you here and why are you interested? This is why. And then this carousel slider will be able to, change the images or put on like announcements or featured collections once we have more collections in there. I'll go down here a little bit and show you these different boxes, which will eventually click out into different pages, so themes, contextual essays, and whatnot. We're still determining what these 6 boxes will look like and click out to. These are just some, tests that we're running. But for now, we've actually used images from the 3 institutions. So that's really exciting for me. I mean, I love looking through everybody's collections. So that was fun. I'll come back right up here. And so the tap navigation bar will have these drop-down menus. So about right now only has resources, but there'll be like documentation or bibliography, definitely a glossary will be under this this little drop-down. And then, education, there'll be like primary source sets, maybe some video demo tutorials, and, instructions basically on, or tips on how to use the portal. Currently, the only buttons that will lead you to any content are theme and browse. Both contain, they both contain content. So browse here, which I will mention a little bit. So we can browse by subjects, people, and locations. So the subjects are all Library of Congress subject heading terms, as you can see here. And then I'll go to people, which are also Library of Congress name authority files or locally created names by me that follow the Library of Congress format. Here they are. And then locations is the same deal, Library of Congress, either authoritative terms or local terms. And you can see all of these, all the ones that are associated with any document in the portal itself, or you can go by the letter. So I will, let's see, choose something that has more than one. So Indians of North America, History, Revolution. If I go into this, this subject, search results will come out to what each document that has that subject. So there's 3 documents here. And while I'm on Indians of North America, I will just point out that part of my job is, figuring out the problems with different subject headings. So in this case, Indians of North America is used in Library of Congress, but a lot of other institutions are using Indigenous Peoples of North America. So, as we evolve, so do the terms and their meanings, and sometimes these controlled vocabularies need updating, but it can be a slow process. So that's why some institutions have chosen to start using more current terminology. And in the APS Digital Library, this is usually combated by specifying specific nations or tribes or group names in the abstract or local subjects. But for the Revolutionary period and the documents I'm working with, they're describing savages and Indians and no actual formal names. So that's something I'm grappling with and trying to find, look to other institutions for guidance and, and getting feedback from stakeholders who are helping us work through some of this as well. I know this came up a lot, or not a lot, in one meeting where a stakeholder did ask, is Indians of North America the right term to use? And then, I get a response from another stakeholder who is actually a member of the Delaware tribe of Indians of Oklahoma, who says that term is appropriate and a lot better than what has been used in the past to describe the indigenous. So there's a lot of varying feedback with these types of subjects. So I will just actually go back here and do a search. What do I? Usually something comes up here. Let's see. Do women. And you see search results. There's 12 here, and we are able to search by title or date. So ascending, descending order. And then we have these beautiful filters on the side, which I'm really proud of. So we can filter by people. So people described in the document itself, or the creator or contributor, the themes that we have given them, the institutions. So that's really nice to see, like, where did this object come from? Did it come from the APS, HSP, or the library company? If we click on that, all of the library company objects that have to do with women will be resulted there. We can also filter by genre and collection, by date. This is really cool. So basically, if you don't like the dates here, you can do your own dates. So say 1773 to 1778, and voila, you get a filter of those 4 objects that fall within that date. And then lastly, we can filter by subject, location, and language, which the majority right now is in English. We do have one French object, or object that is in French. So I'm assuming that we'll have a lot more by 2026 that have different languages. I'm just going to go back really quick and actually take you guys into the digital object page. So I keep on saying digital object. I'm sorry, that's basically what I call this, but this is the document. So the digital surrogate of the actual document. So we have the title up here, different ways to view this letter. And if you're familiar with the APS digital library, it looks a lot similar. I'm not sure that people know about this little function here. I would like to name it something different, but if we go into here, we can see the different pages. And if I click here, and hopefully this works, I can actually zoom in very, very closely to see specific pages. And I can also rotate things so that I can see the writing in different ways. Go back to here, turn to our book object. And then, so we have the viewer, and then we also have the metadata below, which you saw a couple screenshots of. We are working on, or actually in the results page, we're working on getting how these are able to be clicked upon to go out to different, whatever this is. So if I wanted to click on Samuel Adams, oh, this is not working right now. Sorry about that, technical difficulties. Let's say I go out to, okay, everything that has to do, or not everything that has to do, but everything that has that subject of United States, American, or Revolution, American forces. So we see that there are a number of items right now, which actually brings me to another question that I posed to stakeholders, which may seem insignificant, but it does make a real difference when you have thousands of items. So say this was a search result and it did have, say, 1,000 items. Do you want options for the various ways you can view this? Do you want to view 20 objects? Do you want to view 100 objects? Do you want to view less? These little questions that, like I said, seem insignificant, really make a difference. I could take requests on everything else you want to see, but that's all I really have today.
So this is great. Let me ask a few of the questions that we have in the queue here. So the first question is from Frank Gruber. Will everything that you're putting into this portal be safeguarded offline as well? So are these, what are your sort of sustainability and your storage plans?
Yes, I'm going to answer this as best I can. Bayard would be a better, have a better answer to this, but basically, yes, they are saved on APS campus in our servers. So like I said, I don't remember if you know, remember the hamburger in my slideshow, but that bottom bun of Fedora is the preservation layer. So everything, all the digital assets and the metadata along with that will be preserved in Fedora on our servers here. And I know that we do actually have servers that live elsewhere, like a backup system. I know that we have been in talks about a dark archive as well, but that might be a little bit further along the road.
A dark archive sounds ominous. What's a dark archive?
I mean, it just means that, you know, it's out of everyone's purview, kind of. I mean, I'm not going to explain it very well right now.
It's basically sort of like a super off-site storage location.
Yes, basically super off-site storage, yes.
Now, another great part, right, of the commitment that the APS has made is that the documents that the library company and HSP are providing are also going to be backed up on our servers, right, as well as being shared with them.
Yes, yes. So everything that goes into the portal itself will be preserved on site at the APS, but we will also be giving so we're working with HSP and LCP right now, and if in the future I go in and digitize some of their materials, I will be giving that back to them so that they can upload onto their own digital libraries. So this phase and future phases just means that we're gonna do everything to put it onto our portal, but giving them, you know, all of the information and all that to do what they will with it.
And I think that's part of the really exciting aspect of this down the road, that if we work with small historical societies that might have, you know, maybe a few hundred letters from Philadelphia, but that don't have their own digital library, don't have their own in-house digitization program, that in return for them participating and being a partner in this project, we'll give them a real benefit, right? That people can find their materials.
Right.
Much more easy.
You're saying 100 documents. If someone has one document, I mean, that's good enough for us. And even, I mean, I know we've been thinking a little bit about, you know, reaching out to private collectors. I mean, what could that mean for, you know, this portal itself, where those people are not putting their stuff online, like they will have it, but we could make it discoverable and be able to use it.
That's such a great point. Another part of Frank's question is, now will users be able to download the documents that are in the portal?
Yes, I believe, you know, I'm still on this here, and I want to go to just a document really quick and see. I know we've been playing around with what this, you know, the viewer will look like. Right now, we just have share this book. Eventually, we're going to have, you know, download button here where you can download as a PDF. I'm not positive if we are allowing downloads of the, you know, the enhanced TIFFs or any other type of format, but definitely PDF downloads, because that's another thing that the stakeholders have made us aware of, that, you know, for teachers, they want to be able to download these documents and either print them out or be able to share them with their students when they're using primary source sets or just using them in the classroom. So that is definitely on the horizon.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that it's one of those places where I think having the stakeholders represent a range of different users,
yes,
really kind of forces us to think and to talk to them, right? To hear, like, you know, if I'm teaching this in a high school classroom, do all the students have computers in front of them? Or do I want to be able to download to be able to use this for lesson plans? And what size do I need?
Right.
While we're on this record, there's a great question here from James Hill. Will the location of the item described be noted? So maybe you could just scroll down and show a little bit about how we're making sort of transparent, I guess, where these come from, but also the other sort of geographic information.
Right. So, I mean, I'm glad we're on this object because this does not have, so the subject here is Hyde Hall. If I go into this, let's see if I can zoom in. You can see right here, all it says is Hyde Hall. So that's the information I got from here. I'm not going to assume where Hyde Hall is. If there's more information that, stakeholders or, future partners can help us out with in determining where Hyde Hall is, then there would be, say, Hyde Hall was in Philadelphia, then the subject would be Philadelphia as well. So that's about location. Let's see if I can go to a location that is a little better. Let's see, Dorchester. So this Samuel Adams writing to his wife, Sally Preston Adams. He is writing to her in Dorchester and from Crown Point, New York. So this is where you're going to find like where he's writing to or where he's writing from. And that's usually how we point out where locations are. Subjects can also work as, if he mentioned Philadelphia or anywhere else in the letter itself, the subject could be another location access point.
Now, the location of the archive that holds this, is that also on that page?
Yes, so repository would be here. And I was saying earlier how like we want to make a lot more of this clickable so that if you just really quickly want to go to everything that the APS has in this portal, you'll be able to do that pretty quickly from anywhere on these pages. Yeah, so lots of metadata here and lots of tweaking and figuring out what the user will want and what works best.
While you're on the bottom part of that page, I also like that section that says parent collection. So this is a document, if I'm reading this right, that's in the Saul Finestone collection of the American Revolution.
Right.
Why do you think it's important to have the sort of collection information in there?
I mean, same reason why it's important to have the repository in there. You want to know where this came from. So this is a standalone object. You don't know where it's from or what it's connected to. So if I wish it was working now, but we're going to have, another section that says, search for more items like this, or what other items are in this collection. Right now, you can go to this is the URL for the Philosophical Society finding aid for the Saul Finestone collection. So the same thing will happen for any other collection that's within HSP or LCP at the moment, and their URL for their finding aid website will be here. So you'll be able to go directly to other websites from this portal.
So you're going to have to work really hard as a user of this site to ignore where this original object lives. I think that's really impressive here, that nobody's ever going to claim that they can't track down where the original is, because as we know, so many scholars want to see the originals, that the online version is great and I love the interface, but sometimes I'm a little suspicious. Sometimes I want to go and hold it in my hands.
Of course. And, like I was saying earlier with, education or resources where I would want to have, tutorials and instructions and tips for users that are not familiar with this type of digital repository. So, that would be a great little tutorial of like, where did this come from? Well, go to the metadata and you'll find, the title of the collection that it's from, the finding aid, the call number. I mean, there's a lot of information that is within each document metadata.
So another great question here, which of course is we might appear as being teases in all of this. David Maxey asks, is the project up and running for an outside researcher? If so, how can the outside researcher access it?
It is not up and running quite yet. I am wary to say anything else because I know, as Kyle prefaced before I even went into this demo, the team is not used to sharing such beta sites with the public. And I know we're talking about a researcher, so I would think that it would be a special circumstance that we would let a researcher in on all of this information. But I will say that anything that that is from the APS, so the Soul Find Stone collection, this particular document is already uploaded into the APS digital library. So anything that is APS is already in the digital library, and that will continue as I digitize more items and get things up and running.
So I think it's worth sharing with our friends here that this grant runs through the end of October. We will be, I know, what I think is so impressive in working with you, Sabrina, and Bayard on this is that you've accomplished so much in 8 months, and this looks really great to me, but there's still a lot more to go. Do you want to just maybe preview a little bit more of what's going between now and October?
Yeah, so for the portal itself, I mean, there will be a lot more items going into the portal. Right now, or in the past 2 months between May and July, while we were kind of developing and implementing the feedback and testing styling and functionality, I actually worked on a digitization pilot. So, really to determine how to direct our digitization efforts for the next phase of this project. Basically, the goal was to generate useful statistics on the rates of production. So prepping the collection, scanning the collection, doing all the post-production, the metadata creation, enhancement, uploading, and all the quality control that goes with that. So really determining those rates. And so for the APS digitization pilot, I prioritized collections for fellow researcher requests and the size of the collection. Obviously, I wanted to work with a smaller collection, Philly-centric, of course, and narratives that we wanted to see. So I'm saying all this because we want to do the same thing at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. So hopefully in August, I will be able to do another digitization pilot at the HSP, where I'll prioritize in the same way, but really go about it in 2 phases. First, digitizing a collection that's cataloged at the item level. And then second, would be surveying a collection that was cataloged at the collection or folder level, and to see what it would entail or what it would need to go through the whole digitization process. A large portion of the HSP collections proposed for this project are cataloged at the folder and collection level, which means it's going to take a lot more time to get these collections where we want them to go into the portal. So that's what's coming up for me. For the portal itself, I'll show you. I mean, we'll be working on making this a little prettier and and obviously right now you can only search by the title, and that's an identifier to do an advanced search. So we'll be adding more advanced search fields, and also putting this somewhere, the search by, in a better location that would be useful to the user. And then as for our stakeholder team, we're actually going to be meeting with them in August, at the end of August. And this is, our last meeting, and hopefully, our official last meeting, but hopefully not the last meeting we have with them, and staying in contact with them. We'll now start to think about the contextualization of the portal itself. So I came back to this homepage where contextual essays, will be, there will be essays about the, the narratives that we're trying to uncover, and the documents, and, talking about materiality and that sort of thing. So working on that, and the primary source sets are the next phase of this pilot phase project. And then the stakeholders will actually be writing a reflective essay about their time with us in these past, at that point will be 9-10 months of having these bi-monthly meetings, and what is it meant to them, and how do they think that they've helped, or what have they learned, and those will be hopefully accessible in our resources in a type of page that says hear from our stakeholders. So lots of that, and then as we near not the end, because this is going to be a long until 2026, usability testing and talking to people that are not us and not our stakeholders, but students or historians and things like that, or people like that will be wanting to use this portal and getting their feedback. So still a lot to uncover here.
That's great. So November 1st, 2021, this will be done with this grant. What's beautiful about this grant is it forced us to make the portal first and then to go and find, to do all the digitization in the collection. So all of you listening now will be able to play around with it then. We may ask you to kick the tires and give us some feedback and share some of your thoughts at that point. And then, as you said, the next work is figuring out how to digitize 110,000 digital objects at 3 institutions. So thank you all so much for joining us today for this behind the scenes. Thank you, Sabrina, for, as we've said a few times, sharing something that I know you often hold very close. It looks fantastic. Bayard and you are doing great work on this. And many thanks to Linda and Alexis and Jake behind the scenes and Rhonda, our captioner, for making this talk possible today. We always love sharing this, and we very much have appreciated the questions and answers, the questions that you've given to us. So take care, everyone.